behind. Our squad is big.
Hello, and welcome to our town hall, Fighting for Justice
squad,
in Georgia, hosted by Senator Bernie Sanders. I'm Misty Rubik. I'll be helping to co-moderate our event tonight. Thank you for joining us to hear about what's been happening on the ground in Georgia. We have all sorts of amazing folks joining us. We have union leaders. We have the New Georgia Project. We've got State Senator Nikema Williams. We've got the Black Initiative. We have folks who are fighting for justice every single day in their communities in Georgia, joining us to tell you why this election is so important. It is the Friday night before the most important election of modern history, and Georgia is showing us some hotly contested races right now. Georgia voters could help flip the Senate, and we could win this election if Georgia turns out in massive numbers. So thank you for joining us. Welcome and say hello to you joining us in the webinar. If you want to say where you're tuning in from, I'd love to give you some shout outs. For those of you all across the country paying attention tonight to Georgia, we understand there's a lot going on. So we are going to take a quick look at some of the top news coming out of Georgia, and then we'll get right into our show.
Battleground, Georgia. Joe Biden's visit there today coming as a new poll shows the race in Georgia dead heat. Biden ahead by just 0.3 of a point.
To have the Democratic presidential nominee in Georgia in the final week here demonstrates just how competitive this state has become. I'm running in the closest Senate race in the country against incumbent Republican David Perdue.
Well, perhaps Senator Perdue would have been able to respond properly to the COVID-19 pandemic if you hadn't been fending off multiple federal investigations for insider trading.
The battle for control of the U.S. Senate very well could come down to a special election in Georgia.
We say all the time that elections have consequences. That feels like a gross understatement this year. We've seen over 220,000 Americans die, over 7,000 here in this state.
The coronavirus task force warns Georgia's current policies are not enough to stop the state's widespread and expanding community viral spread.
Our estimate is that as many as 40% of regional households could be under threat of eviction if nothing is done.
You start looking at all your essentials and things like that, and sometimes rent isn't an essential.
This storm is moving to North Georgia. As it does, we will see tropical storm force winds and very heavy rain.
Georgia is historically a red state. Now the Democrats are on the cusp of turning it blue. A Biden victory here would likely doom the president's re-election bid.
All right, we have 4 days until this election. We are working hard to turn Georgia blue. We are here tonight, focused on Georgia, to talk about what we have to do to defeat Donald Trump. I see some of you joining our webinar. I want to say hello to Amiko from Decatur. We've got Julius from Covington, some folks from East Atlanta. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And now to the host of the hour, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Well, Misty, thank you very much. And to all of the viewers out there, thanks for tuning in, and to our panelists, our great panel, thanks for being with us tonight. There is a song, I think it's a Ray Charles song, called Georgia is on My Mind. Well, turns out that Georgia is on the minds of a whole lot of people throughout America today, because what's going on in Georgia is something that nobody really anticipated 6 months ago. The assumption was that Georgia is a Republican state. They have 2 senators up for re-election, that the Republicans will replace, will stay in power in those 2 seats, that Trump will win Georgia. But you know what? Things are changing. And what we're looking at Georgia, and we will discuss tonight, is Georgia's voter turnout has been extraordinarily high. Over 80% of the people who voted in 2016 have already voted. And Election Day is still 4 days away. And we're seeing a lot of young people coming out to vote, which I think is a great sign for progress. So Georgia, thank you very much for all of what you are doing. And what we heard on the video is absolutely true. If Biden wins Georgia, hard for me to imagine that Trump gets reelected. If we pick up those 2 Senate seats from Mr. Warnock and Mr. Ossoff, we will, as Democrats, control the United States Senate and begin begin to be able to start representing working families in a way that we have not seen in this country in a very long time. All right, if there is anybody out there who's living in a cave and has just kind of come out and wants to know why this election is, in fact, the most important election in the modern history of America, let me tell you why. Number one, it is absolutely imperative that we get rid of the most dangerous president in modern American history. This is a president who is a pathological liar. And I got to say something to our conservative friends out there, our moderate friends. You know what? I don't care what your politics are. But if you think it is okay to have somebody who lies every single day, then I think you don't have a sense of what this country is supposed to be about. So I don't care what your politics are. That reason is enough to have you vote against Trump. Second of all, you have a president who does not respect or understand our Constitution or the rule of law. A president who says, well, you know, if I lose the election, I may not leave office. And when he says that, he is denigrating the millions of men and women who have put their lives on the line to defend our country and our Constitution. As a United States Senator, I swear an oath of allegiance to the Constitution. So do the men and women in the armed forces. And Trump has shown that he really does not respect our Constitution. That's reason number two, that you should be voting against Trump. Reason number three is that we cannot run a government in the year 2020 where our leadership does not believe in science. And right now in this country, as all of you know, just yesterday, we have had more cases of the COVID-19 reported than any time since this terrible, terrible pandemic began. And we have a president up there who from day one has downplayed the pandemic. He has insulted scientists. He has called Dr. Fauci an idiot. He has rejected the advice of scientists. And right now, as we speak, he is holding rallies around the country in defiance of what the CDC says should be guidelines. People are there without masks. People are there without social distancing. And unless we have a president who believes in science, who's going to give us national guidelines based on science, we are not going to get a handle on the pandemic, and therefore we're not going to get our economy back to where it must go, because people are afraid to go shopping, afraid to go to work, afraid to go to school. So we've got to get a handle on the pandemic, and we will then have a strong economy. That's not going to happen with a president who does not believe in science. And the other reason I think fundamentally that we should be evicting Donald Trump from the White House and electing Biden really has to do with the needs of working families all over this country who are struggling in a way that we have not seen since the Great Depression. I mean, millions of people have lost their jobs as a result of the pandemic. They have lost their health care. They're worried about getting evicted from their apartments. And we need a government that understands the pain that working families and lower income people are experiencing out there. And this is a promise I make as a member of the United States Senate. If Democrats control the Senate, we will pass as business number one, first thing on the agenda, a significant COVID-19 emergency relief package to protect the working people of this country who are suffering so much as a result of the pandemic. And that means extending that $600 supplement to unemployment. It means, at the very least, I would like more, at the very least, a $1,200 check for every adult. It means providing health care for those people who have lost their health care. It means significant aid to states, cities, and towns so they don't have to fire workers because of their significant decline in revenue. It means help to hospitals. It means help so that we can do the kind of testing that we need to do as a nation in combating COVID-19. Furthermore, what we will do as a Congress, if Democrats gain control of the Senate, and you guys in Georgia have the opportunity to send us not one. Every other state has the opportunity to send us one. You can send us 2 United States senators. And if you do that, man, we're going to be off and running. And what that means is we're going to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. We're going to have equal pay for equal work so that women do not make 80 cents on the dollar compared to men or less. It means that we're going to make it easier for workers to join unions. It means that we're going to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure, our roads and our bridges, and create millions of good-paying jobs. It means, in fact, that we're going to tackle climate change. Trump thinks it's a hoax. He is tragically wrong. It is a great, great crisis facing the whole planet. We can create millions of jobs as we transform our energy system away from fossil fuel. It means making public colleges and universities and HBCUs tuition-free for working-class young people. It means making sure that women can continue to control their own bodies. It means real criminal justice reform, real immigration reform. It means expanding healthcare to millions of people who today don't have it, as opposed to Trump wanting to throw 22 million people off the healthcare they have by eliminating the Affordable Care Act. It means lowering the cost of prescription drugs. So this campaign, to me, is fundamentally about 2 things. Number one, not allowing the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country to continue in office. But secondly, it is creating a government that begins to work for working people and not just the 1%. No more tax breaks for billionaires. Quite the contrary, they're going to start paying their fair share of taxes. So with that, I am now delighted to begin introducing the great panelists that we have today. And at the very top of our list is Nikema Williams. And I think everybody who is viewing this live stream, especially the people in Georgia, know who Nikema is. Nikema is currently a state senator in the legislature in Georgia. She is the chair of the Democratic Party of Georgia and is the Democratic candidate for Georgia's 5th congressional district, filling the enormously large shoes of the late John Lewis. Nikema, thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Thank you so much, Senator Sanders. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening to have this very important discussion about Battleground Georgia. Senator Sanders, I am very grateful for you endorsing my campaign and standing with me as I fight out loud and on purpose for the promise of America for all of us. I'm very grateful. From a very young age, y'all, I've been an activist. I grew up as a little girl in rural Alabama, passing out slate cards, helping Democrats get elected, jumping off the back of my grandpa's pickup truck, because we knew that getting Democrats elected would put working families first. I grew up reading in textbooks that taught about my great aunt, Autherine Lucy, as she integrated the University of Alabama, becoming the first Black student to ever enroll in that institution. And this ingrained in me a commitment to standing up to injustice and demanding equality. But like many of you, I've spent the last few months mourning the loss of our beloved Congressman John Lewis. We lost a true American hero, y'all. And to so many, he was an inspiration with his lifelong commitment to progressive values, equality, and voting rights. I know that no one will ever fill Congressman Lewis's shoes in Congress, but I plan to draw from his inspiration, his leadership, and that fighting spirit that we need now more than ever in this country. The challenges that so many Americans are facing are real for me because I've lived them. I believe that healthcare is a human right, and that's why I will fight for Medicare for all when I get to Congress. I know what it's like to have to refuse much needed medical care, not knowing how I would pay the emergency room bill. I remember all too well struggling to help my mom pay for her cancer treatments as she battled stage 4 colon cancer in the final years of her life. The United States is the wealthiest nation in the world with world-class doctors and hospitals, but yet our healthcare system fails so many. No American, no matter their zip code, should be forced to decide between medical care or paying their bills, and no medical care should make any American go bankrupt. But on November 13th, 2018, I truly learned what it means to live out the meaning of good trouble. I was arrested for standing with my constituents for simply demanding that every vote be counted in the aftermath of our 2018 gubernatorial election. I was removed from the state capitol where I served as a state senator with zip ties on my wrist and booked into the Fulton County Jail, all because I had the audacity to defend my constituents' right to vote. Unfortunately, the state of Georgia is well known for rampant voter suppression. Every election cycle, we're faced with the stories of last-minute precinct closures, fear tactics, and hundreds of thousands of people being purged from our voting rolls. But y'all, I won't stop until our democracy is fully realized for all of us. With just 4 days election day, we know what's at stake. We're literally fighting for our democracy. And this election is the most consequential of our lifetime. On November 3rd, our right to choose, our right to cast a ballot, our right to access healthcare, and our right to take action on climate change are all on the ballot. Our country, our state, and I know the 5th Congressional District, we're all at a pivotal moment. District 5 deserves a leader to fight against the repeated attempts to strip away our rights, our dignity, and our ability to thrive. And in Washington, I'll make Medicare for All a reality and fight against the rampant voter suppression tactics engineered to keep our communities away from the ballot box. I'll fight as I have throughout my career to make sure that everyone, no matter their zip code, no matter their bank account, can live the full promise of America. I'm grateful to be here with you this evening, and I'm ready to continue to fight with you all. Thank you so much, Senator Sanders.
Well, Nekima, thank you. And I so much look forward to working with you in the United States Congress. In electing you, I know that the people of Georgia are going to have a real fighter for the working families of your state. So thank you for all that you've done and are doing. Our next panelist is James Williams. James is the president of the Atlanta North Georgia Labor Council. He is also an organizer and political director for the IBEW in Georgia. And let me say before James takes the mic, one of the things that we intend to do with a new Congress and a new president is to make it easier for workers to join in unions, because we are not going to have a strong middle class in this country unless we have a strong labor movement. So James, thank you so much for being with us and for the work you are doing.
Thank you, Senator Sanders, and it's good to be with everybody tonight. The working families in Georgia have been hit hard by our government's lack of response to this pandemic. We have laid off workers and furloughed workers that are struggling to make ends meet right now. We also have Georgians that are forced to go to work to make sure that our citizens remain healthy, that they have food on the table, and in this era, make sure that your internet connection keeps working. They have been deemed essential workers, yet they are not getting the pay and the protections that they deserve, while doing an excellent job and risking their safety and the safety of their families. At the start of the pandemic, the Atlanta North Georgia Labor Council, along with its community partners, we started doing food distributions. We set up free COVID testing and rent and utility assistance for our members and members of the community. But that hasn't been enough. After the stimulus ended, we're now experiencing lines of cars with no food to give them, people lined up for tests with no tests to give them. But we keep fighting in Georgia. What we are fighting for is we're fighting for another stimulus package, like Senator Sanders was talking about, to give Georgia citizens fewer things to worry about in this time during this terrible pandemic. We're also fighting to get the Butch-Lewis Act passed. The Butch-Lewis Act is a pension protection plan, and it will help us keep the promises that we made to our workers years ago. And another thing that Senator Sanders brought up is we are fighting for the PRO Act. The PRO Act, which passed the House and is now sitting collecting dust on Senator Mitch McConnell's desk. We at the Atlanta North Georgia Labor Council proudly represent 60,000 union members and their families, but we fight for all working families in the state of Georgia. And that is why we are working as hard as we possibly can to turn Georgia blue. We're that close, folks. We can flip this state. And in doing so, we can send Jon Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock to the Senate to help Senator Sanders get these things done and to help Georgia workers. Thank you.
James, thank you very much for the very important work that you're doing within the labor movement. Our next panelist is John R. Taylor III. John is a founder of the Black Male Initiative Georgia, where he serves as co-chair. John also works as the National Field Director of the Property Services Division at SEIU. He is based in Atlanta. John, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, Senator Sanders, and thank you to the other panelists for being on with us this evening. Thanks for having us. So yeah, Black Male Initiative Georgia was originally founded for the purpose of trying to lift up the positive narrative around Black men, for us to be able to shape, capture, and project our own narrative about the work that we do. Right now in Georgia, we have approximately 320,000 Black men who are registered, who have been identified as low propensity or infrequent voters. The truth of the matter is those Black men are not lazy. They're not apathetic. They haven't given up. The reality is this political climate does not speak to them. The reality is there's a reason that those brothers decided to register to vote in the first place, and they care. Those Black men are critical thinkers. They're bonded to Black women. They're bonded to our communities. They care about what's happening. They deeply want to work. They want jobs. They want a better economy. They want schools that provide and protect their children. They want a community that listens to them and cares about them. But most importantly, they want to make it home alive at the end of the night. Most importantly, they want to be treated with respect and dignity. Most importantly, they want to be treated as equals. So until they can wear a hoodie and a mask, which is oftentimes what's required in this pandemic, and feel safe on the streets, we have to continue to mobilize. We have to continue to speak out. And most importantly, when we talk about Black men, the communication that's happening right now that's supposed to be geared to them is simply not working. We understand that common sense messaging about day-to-day practices and what's required to survive as a Black man in this society is at the cornerstone of the communication that we need. So we don't reach out to folks and ask them if they're voting. We reach out to brothers and ask them if they've eaten, if their kids have eaten. We ask them, how are they dealing with the ongoing stress and trauma of wearing this skin in a community that sometimes hates them? The reality is these brothers care so deeply that they are still in the fight. I'm not afraid of the 300,000 Black men that are registered but haven't voted yet. I'm afraid of the system that stops reaching out to them, that thinks it's easier to reach out to another base, that thinks it's more important to talk to white women or Black women or anyone else progressive other than Black men. And I don't think it's important to only talk to Black men. They have to talk to all of us as a family. We are not in competition with our sisters. We support our sisters. We protect our sisters. And as a community, we will stand together and be supported and protected by a system that recognizes the value of us. That's what we need. So that's what we're standing up for. Thank you for having us, Senator Sanders.
John, thank you very much for the very, very important work you are doing. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Stacey Fox. Stacey has been fighting for reproductive rights and bodily autonomy for over 20 years. For today's purposes, you should know that she currently spends her professional time as the president and CEO of Planned Parenthood Southeast Advocates, and they are working across Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. Stacey, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Senator Sanders, thank you so much. I'm incredibly honored to be with this incredible group of social justice warriors here in Georgia. And a shout out, I heard some of my East Atlanta neighbors are on tonight. Good to be with all of y'all. I mean, listen, I think when people hear about Planned Parenthood showing up for election work, they jump to this assumption that this is all about the fight for access to safe and legal abortion. And let me be clear, we're at Planned Parenthood every day. They're providing access to safe and legal abortion and aren't going to stop that. But what I want people to understand is that this fight isn't not now and never has been about abortion. I mean, this is about our very basic human rights. This is about today, a fight for abortion. Today's like the abortion's the word of the day, right? It's the thing that our opponents are using to rally their base and fundraise off of. But yesterday it was birth control, and right before that it was the right to vote or right to own property. This is a bigger fight. You know, there is a referendum of our very freedoms on this ballot, and Planned Parenthood just shows up for a small part of it and part of this ecosystem with these incredible warriors that you're hearing from tonight. And whether it's fighting for access to abortion or birth control or standing up for those women who have been detained in ICE detention centers and had their bodies ripped apart against their consent, that's what we're here for. That's what we're fighting about, and that's what's on the ballot. And listen, these elections are so important up and down the ballot in Georgia. If you don't know already, we can take the House back in Georgia, as well as change the face of our congressional delegation. And as you said, Senator, send 2 more champions to work alongside you. And I personally can't wait to call my former colleague, my next Congresswoman, Senator Nikema Williams, who worked alongside me at Planned Parenthood for a number of years. You know, I think a lot about we sort of lived this fight last year in Georgia, as a lot of people know, the abortion ban that passed. And I think about the bill sponsor and the governor, who, when they signed the bill, said that the shrill voices of their opposition were just going to fade into the background once this bill was signed into law. Well, sorry to tell them, but, you know, every time I've ever been shushed and everybody I know has ever been shushed, we only get louder. And so they were counting on the wrong team and the wrong people, because the people here in Georgia said they didn't want the government in their most personal and private healthcare decisions. And the governor and Ed Setzler, who are going to lose their jobs this year and in 2 years, just didn't listen. We're going to take back our state. We're going to take back our country. We're going to take back our democracy. And I'm so glad that the rest of the country is already now paying attention to what we've known for a couple of years. Y'all, Georgia's in play. Thank you, Senator Sanders.
Stacey, thank you so much for what you're doing and for your wonderful statement. Our next panelist is Nsé Ufot, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the New Georgia Project and its affiliate, New Georgia Project Action Fund. Under Nsé's leadership, NGP has registered incredibly over 425,000 Georgians to vote. She has dedicated her life and career to working on civil, human, and workers' rights issues and aims to strengthen Georgia's democracy. Nsé, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Senator Sanders, and good evening, Georgia. Welcome to America's newest battleground state. I'm so proud to not only be a naturalized citizen, but I'm also super proud to be a Georgia Peach. Many people know that Georgia has a long and a recent history of voter suppression, right? We lived through 2016, we lived through 2018, where the New Georgia Project registered 18,000 18-year-olds who, after the tragic shooting at Sandy Hook on February 14th, had become radicalized, wanted to know what is it that they could do to keep themselves safe, right? And so they started registering to vote. They knew about the importance of the governor's election. We fast forward. There's a historic gap in Georgia and Georgia's elections. For more than a decade, when you look at sort of top of the ticket races, President of the United States Senator, governor, there's historically been about a 250,000, 300,000 vote gap between the successful Republican and the losing Democrat. And then in 2018, under the leadership of Minority Leader Stacey Abrams, that gap was narrowed to 54,000 votes. And now we have a ball game. And that gap was narrowed to 54,000 votes, with 1.7 million people being purged from the voter rolls, with 60,000 people who were registered in 2018 not getting added to the voter rolls, right? On and on and on. We maintain that the electoral outcomes that we are going to see this November are absolutely determined by who shows up and whose votes count. Period, point blank, the end. And so, yes, while voter suppression is very much a part of our reality, the truth of the matter is that early voting in Georgia started October 12th and it ended today. And we have seen historic turnout in all demographics every single day. Democrats need 4 seats to gain control of the United States Senate, and 2 of them are on the ballot in Georgia. Do you know what that means? That means that Georgians are in the unique position to save our democracy. Listen, we have had to save ourselves. We have statewide leadership who hasn't taken coronavirus seriously, one of the last states to shut down and the first state to reopen. Now, while we don't have governor on the ballot this year, again, there's an opportunity to vote for a new president. There's an opportunity to flip the United States Senate. There's an opportunity to spread the lead in the House. And there's an opportunity to flip the Georgia House and the Georgia Senate. And do you know what that means? That means that our minimum wage, which is currently $5.15 an hour, there's an opportunity to raise that. Our elected officials are not embarrassed by it. And so now is the opportunity to fire them and replace them with people who are going to co-govern with the people and go to Atlanta and go to Washington, D.C. to do the people's work. So I'm super excited. Early voting ended today. My dog wants you to know that you have to make sure that if you haven't voted, if the people in your group chat haven't voted yet, that you remind people that Tuesday, November 11th, is an opportunity for Georgia voters to put the entire country on our back and save democracy.
Let me, before we end, say thank you so much. You have gotten me very, very excited. And congratulations for the work that you and Stacey and everybody in Georgia has done to take on this criminal activity of voter suppression. And you know, what really irks me is when you have cowardly politicians who refuse to debate the issues. I don't care if somebody disagrees with me. Get up, make your case, try to convince the voters. But don't be cowardly and try to prevent people from voting because they're going to vote against you. That is so un-American, so outrageous, it's unbelievable. And I am just so pleased that people in Georgia have stood up, taken on this voter suppression, and have registered hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of voters. And we're seeing the results of that as we speak, with what looks like to be the highest voter turnout in Georgia history. With that, Misty, let me give you the mic over to you. I think we have some questions. Is that right?
Yeah, we do. We have lots of folks tuning in, paying attention, and we actually are going to hear first from someone who's tuning in from Atlanta and is an airport food worker, Cheryl Amufa. Welcome to the show. How are you doing, Cheryl? Thanks for joining us. What's your question for the panel?
Yes, I do. Hi, my name is Cheryl Amufa, and I worked at the airport for 15 years. I'm 58 years old. I work for HMS Host, and I was furloughed March 21st because of COVID, which was a shocker, but I say, okay, fine. We went on with it just to find out 3 months later that they were gonna drop our insurance. And I'm like, man, my family depends on this. That was crucial for me because I'm asthmatic and I do have high blood pressure. So what am I gonna do in the middle of a pandemic? So, Senator, my question is, when is Trump and the Senate gonna pass the HEROES Act to help resolve some of these issues that's bothering a lot of people, including myself?
Well, Cheryl, Trump is not going to pass anything, and Mitch McConnell is not going to pass anything. But the first, and I know that's painful because it's going to take us some time. We're going to have to wait until January. But the first order of business for a Democratic Senate will, in fact, be to pass the HEROES Act, and that is legislation passed 6 months ago in the House, which is an over $3 trillion bill to provide absolute and necessary protection for working families all over this country. And what that bill does is it extends the $600 supplement to your unemployment check that you previously received. It means that every adult in this country will get at least a $1,200 check. I think it should be more than that. It means, as Cheryl indicated, if you lose your health insurance, that health insurance will be replaced. It means substantial aid to states, cities, and towns so they don't have to lay off their employees, aid to education, and to all of the programs that working families depend upon. The other point that I would make, Cheryl, is why we've got to do that as quickly as we can. Let us not lose track of the fact that we are living in the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people as a human right. And that is why I believe, and a growing number of people in America believe, that we need to pass a Medicare for all single payer program which says whether you're working, you're not working, you're old, you're young, you're making millions, you're working in a fast food restaurant, no matter what your situation is, you should be and must be entitled to health care as a human right. So that's where we are with that one, Cheryl.
Great. So we have another person tuning in. We're going to welcome to the show Sandra Lee Williams, who is a labor leader from Woodstock. Welcome to the show, Sandra.
Good evening. Thank you. I am not only the executive director of the Atlanta North Georgia Labor Council, but also a member of the Retail Wholesale Department Store Union, the RWDSU. And we, as well as the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW, represent thousands of poultry workers throughout the state. The state of Georgia is huge in the poultry industry. What has happened through those plants and to the people working in those plants has been horrific. It's been a callous disregard for health and the lives of workers by employers and the government, even in the best of times, but it was only worsened during the pandemic. What can we do to protect them, the workers in poultry and other meat processing plants, and show our respect for what they contribute to our society every day?
I'm happy to start it, but if other people want to jump in who are on the panel, please feel free to do it. What Sandra says is absolutely true. It's true not only in Georgia, it's true in Iowa, it's true all over this country. People who are working in packing houses, whether it's poultry or beef or pork or whatever it may be, are coming down in very large numbers with the coronavirus. Many of them are getting sick and some of them are dying. And what we do not have now in this country, because of the irresponsibility of the President of the United States, are strict guidelines in how we combat the coronavirus and how we protect workers in packing houses and meat processing plants all across this country. So what we have seen is terrible abuse of these workers. Workers were going to work who were sick, spreading the illness. Workers did not know when other people in the plant had the virus and were being exposed to the virus. Workers did not have the personal protective equipment that they needed. Workers were not getting the testing that they needed. And what we have right now is a situation where Mitch McConnell wants to absolve all of these corporations from any legal responsibility. Well, we believe in the opposite. We believe that there must be guidelines in which these meatpacking plants operate under that protect workers. And that is certainly not the case right now. If anybody, Nekima or anybody else wants to jump in, please do.
Senator Sanders, thank you for talking about the national protections that we need to put in place, because unfortunately here in Georgia, just during the June legislative session, the state of Georgia legislators here passed a bill that gave protections to businesses and not employers, not workers in so many industries across the state. I stood with labor leaders when we fought against this bill in the final day of the legislative session in June, when we were supposed to be making sure that we got our unemployment protections right for so many workers across the state that are still hurting. But yet the Georgia General Assembly was passing protections for businesses, giving them immunity from any employees who get sick or come to work, and you don't have to give them any detail. So we have to get these federal protections in place. But Sandra, also, we know that the Georgia General Assembly, as NSA told us, we can flip the state house this year. And with the numbers that we're seeing and the record turnout, we have a real opportunity. So we have to make sure that not only do we get the right people elected president and vice president and get me to Congress and get some more help for Senator Sanders in the U.S. Senate, but y'all, we got to pay attention to our local elections and make sure that we flip the state house, because that business immunity bill that was passed in June of this year was critical for making sure that businesses don't even have to protect their employees when they come to work. And
Nekima said it better than me. And what she is saying is exactly what Mitch McConnell wants to do in the U.S. Senate. When you give immunity to employers, what you were saying is, hey, you don't have to worry about your workers at all. They could all get sick. Half of them could die. Do not worry, because there's no legal responsibility that you're going to have to face. So Nekima hit the nail right on the head. And what we need is exactly the opposite. We need to have guidelines and say to employers, guess what? You are going to protect your workers. And if you don't, you're in serious trouble.
And James, did you want to chime in on this one as well, being a labor leader?
Yeah, we fought that corporate immunity bill quite hard, both in the House and the Senate side. I mean, it was probably, they dropped that bill. We didn't even know what the language was in the bill. It was constantly changing. So we fought that for about 36 hours. All of us labor lobbyists and other folks, we even pulled some people out of retirement to help fight this bill. But the main thing was the Speaker of the House stated that he would not pass any other legislation until the corporate immunity bill was passed. And that included the budget for the state of Georgia. So he tied the hands of his own Republican Party, and they were able to pass it on fairly close to a party line vote. But another thing that you can do to help protect the poultry plant workers, both in Georgia and across the country, is you need to bring OSHA in and set up guidelines for line speeds. Because right now there are no guidelines in the state of Georgia, and they can sling those chickens through as quickly as they want to, which leads to exponentially more injuries, more hospitalizations and things like that. So that's just another thing that you could do to help protect the workers of Georgia is pass either a federal regulation, because there's nothing on the books in Georgia to help control the line speed and how quickly those animals are moving through the plant.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, James. Thank you so much for that input. So we have another live question here. So I want to bring in Rafael Aragon, who's living in Georgia and is with Freedom University. Welcome to the show, Rafael. What's your question for the panel?
Hey, Cindy, Misty, thank you. My question is for Senator Sanders. First, hola, tío Bernie. My name is Rafael. I'm a DACA recipient here in Georgia. I work at Freedom University, which is an underground school for undocumented students. There are underground schools in Georgia because 10 years ago, the Board of Regents banned undocumented students from admission to the top public universities in the state. We trust that you're a friend of immigrants and that you will do everything in your power to push for the DREAM Act if Biden is elected president. We're willing to wait for the DREAM Act, but we've been waiting 19 years. Until the DREAM Act is passed, there will be thousands of us here in Georgia who will still be banned from college. As a DACA recipient, I pay taxes, but cannot vote. In other words, I experience taxation without representation. Senator Sanders, in your power as a US Senator, will you help represent undocumented students like me? Will you work with your colleagues in the Senate and the Biden administration to hold a hearing to investigate the Board of Regents' unconstitutional resegregation of Georgia's public universities?
I would be delighted to do that, and I think I'm on the committee that has jurisdiction over issues like that. And let me just say to you, Rafael, that I would hope very, very early in the Biden administration, we repeal the executive orders passed by Trump in terms of DACA, that we restore to the 1.8 million young people eligible for the DACA program their full legal rights that they previously had, that we move as aggressively as we can to comprehensive immigration reform and a path towards citizenship. How absurd is it that at a time when we need the best educated workforce in the world, we need more doctors and teachers and scientists, that we have a situation in Georgia where bright young people are unable to get the education that they need. So this is something we are going to work on very rapidly. And by the way, we're going to make public colleges and universities tuition free for all working class families in this country, including the undocumented.
Rafael, I know this question was submitted to Senator Sanders, but I know that you are not a voter here and you can't vote for me, but I still represent you because you are a person here in the city, in the state, and I will be your voice. I promise to continue to stand with you. I remember when students from Freedom University staged a sit-in and at the Board of Regents meeting, I was down at the Capitol and I went over to meet you guys at the jail that night to make sure that you were treated fairly and that you were released safely. So you might not be able to vote for me, but when I get to Washington, I promise to continue to stand with you and be your voice until you're able to vote for me as well.
Thank you, State Senator Williams. We have a few other questions that I want to get to that have come in from the chat. I want to start with this first one that comes from Aiden in Athens. Aiden asks, what does Senator Sanders and the rest of the panel have to say to the young people in Georgia that don't agree with the Republican Party, but don't feel like the Democratic Party goes far enough with healthcare, specifically healthcare and the environment? Senator Sanders, you want to kick off and we can get around the panel?
Yeah, well, Aiden is the name of the person with the question? Aiden?
Yes.
Well, Aiden, as it happens, I agree with you. I think that the Democratic Party has not stood up as strong as it should against powerful special interests, and I think it has not fought for an agenda that represents the needs of a working class in America today that is struggling in a way that we've not seen since the Great Depression. But let me be very clear, Aiden. There is no way that we're going to go forward on any of the issues that we have talked about tonight: worker safety, education, healthcare, decent wages, climate change. No way we're going to make any progress if Donald Trump is reelected. And by the way, if Democrats do not gain control over the United States Senate. So what I'm saying is, you may not agree with Biden on every issue. You may believe that he and the Democratic leadership are not going forward in a way as aggressively as you would like or I would like. But if we have the White House and if we have a Democratic majority in the Senate, we will stand up and begin the progress of raising the minimum wage, of making public colleges and universities tuition free, of expanding healthcare, of real immigration reform and protecting the young people in DACA, protecting a woman's right to choose. And that is not a small thing. So the issue is not whether you agree on every issue with Joe Biden. The issue is the absolute necessity of getting rid of a president who is a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, a xenophobe, and a religious bigot, and starting the process of transforming this country and having a government that works for all of us, not just the people on top. So please, please join your fellow Georgians, come out and vote. We desperately need your help.
And Stacey, you've been working for over 20 years trying to make sure everybody gets access to the healthcare they need as well. You're right there in Georgia. What would you say to this question? Someone who might be worried that, we're not going to make enough progress right now if we vote. What would you say?
Misty, thanks. And Aiden, thanks for this question. I couldn't agree with you more, Senator Sanders. I think the reality is that, the cliche that we're all saying right now is the very basic truth. We've all got to get comfortable with discomfort. We've got to get past our shame and stigma about talking about these issues around healthcare. I mean, I can't tell you how many people have a hard time saying abortion. Abortion is a normal part of healthcare, and we should be able to talk about it. And not talking about it just sends people into this space of stigma, which gives our opposition power. And whether we're talking about climate or we're talking about healthcare, the importance is that these things are so intrinsically tied together that we have to become bold and we have to be ready to dismantle and rebuild these systems of inequitable power that we've allowed to be built. And I think we've been too busy about trying to allow everybody in to give input and have us, be part of this process, which is so important. But we also have to be bold. And we have to be willing to do the things that we've never been willing to do before in order to create this equity and freedom that we've been fighting for so long.
Thank you, Stacey. We have another question here, and I actually want to kick this one to you, John, first, and get your thoughts on this one. It's directed at electeds, but I think your input would be good. So this comes from Julius Covington in Georgia. Julius says, will the Democratic-controlled House, Senate, and Executive pass laws to protect and enhance participation in federal elections? For example, making Election Day a federal holiday. John, can you speak to, would that help folks that you're working with at the Black Initiative to have some sort of executive order like that?
So I'll say this, everything that we do to increase the opportunity and access for our folks to vote will be helpful. What we talk about at the Black Male Initiative is the reality that before we had early vote, our folks were standing in line. When we had early vote, our folks were standing in line. When we started having weekend votes, our folks were standing in line. When we had Sunday votes, we ran souls to the polls. Every opportunity you afford someone who cares about their livelihood will give them a better opportunity to vote. So absolutely, we need to have our election day as a holiday, but we also need to have a conversation about why we still choose Tuesday as an election day. We're no longer going to the farmer's market as we did 150 years ago. We should be voting from home. We should have instant runoff voting. We should be able to vote from our cell phones. I should be able to vote from my bedroom if I want to, as long as I'm living inside of the US. I should be able to vote in Georgia in any county, in any polling location, early vote or not, and it should be mandatory that these things are put into law for us. The truth of the matter is there's a reason why they are creating barriers to make it more difficult for folks to vote. We have 7.5-hour wait lines during early vote on October 12th. That's a form of voter suppression. It makes no sense. But we stood in line and we waited because we believe in the tenets of this democracy. And I'll close by saying, at the end of the day, no matter what they do, we will stand in line. We will vote. We will have our voices heard, and we will stand up. But it would be great if the system would recognize that people are really fighting for this and help.
Let me just jump in and concur with everything that John said. I want everybody to take a step back and think about it. This is the wealthiest nation on earth. We send people to the moon. We have incredibly sophisticated guided missile systems. And somehow or another, it is beyond our capability to have people walk to a polling booth and vote in a few minutes. And as John indicated, in Georgia and in other states, people are waiting in line 5, 6, 7 hours. That is not an accident. My friends, that is deliberate. That is exactly what John said. That is called voter suppression. And how many people said, you know what, I got to get back to work. I got a kid at home. I can't wait 5 hours to cast the vote. Many people did, but some people didn't. And that is exactly what the leadership, Republican leadership all over this country wants. They are suppressing the vote. They are refusing, in some instances, actually count the ballots that have been cast. And one of the very early things that we've got to do in the Congress is election reform. And John's right. If you're 18 or older in this country, we've got to make it easier for you to vote. We want the highest voter turnout rate of any country on earth. And by the way, we also have to deal with campaign finance reform because billionaires should not be able to buy elections. So this is an issue of enormous consequence. And again, I congratulate the people of Georgia for maybe leading this country in taking on that difficult issue. But we in Washington have got to act, give us the opportunity, and we will.
Thank you, Senator. So, we have had a great conversation tonight. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to those of you who are joining the webinar and to those of you who asked questions. I want to turn to Nsé. You've registered almost 500,000 voters in Georgia. So it's safe to say you know something about this issue. For folks watching who want to know what can they do right now to take action on all the things we've talked about, even beyond just voting, what do you say to those folks, Nsé?
What I say to you is that we legitimately have 3 or 4 days to hop into your group chat, to reach out to your friends, your family, your loved ones. Go to iwillvote.com. There you can make a plan. What's your plan to vote on election day? Are you going to vote before work? Are you going to vote after work? Are you going to pick up the kids first, etc.? So make a plan, make it real in your mind so that we can go through, so that again, Georgians can save our country, save our democracy, and stop this national nightmare. I want people to understand that a vote, your vote is not a gift to the candidate. It is a tool that we are wielding to build the country, to build a Georgia that makes sense for us, where our families can start to thrive, right? Closing the gap between tipped wage and the minimum wage is on the ballot. OSHA protections and worker protections are on the ballot. Environmental protections are on the ballot. Listen, half of the state woke up without power because of these extreme weather events. And we're going to have more of them. So we need to have elected officials at every level of government who believe science, who understand that extreme weather events and climate change are our reality, but they don't have to always be. Right? The HEROES Act is on the ballot, right? And so what I would tell you again is if you've already early voted, please make sure that you check in with your friends, your family, your colleagues, your neighbors, your loved ones. Go to iwillvote.com. If you are wanting to research candidates, again, because there's an opportunity to flip the Georgia House and the Georgia Senate, go to readyset.vote. Again, readyset.vote. It's a guide that takes candidates' positions, summarizes them so you understand where people stand on the issues that matter, right? If you want to get involved, there are tons of organizations. I would love for you to come and do election protection with the New Georgia Project or to hand out bottles of water on election day, but there are tons of us. Planned Parenthood is going to be out in these streets. So our brothers, our siblings, right? Over at the Black Male Voter Initiative. So I'm super excited about this moment that we're in. We are so powerful, and elections are compression points. They're opportunities for us to flex our power and tell the world about the Georgia that we want to live in and the country that we want to live in. I'm so proud to be a Georgian, and I'm so proud to be with you all. Let's bring it home, y'all.
Thank you so much. And we have hosted, Senator Sanders has hosted over 20 of these events. And let me tell you, I can feel the fire from Georgia. I think Georgia's going to bring it home for us. And with that, let me turn it to you, Senator Sanders, for closing thoughts.
Well, there's not much that I can add to what the great panels, everyone has been so great and made, I think, just great contributions to our understanding of what is at stake and how we go forward once we have a government responsive to ordinary people rather than big money interests. So for Georgia, let me just say this, without getting all too nervous, and I say this as your brother from the north here, and that is the eyes of the country and the world are now on Georgia. You have come an enormously long way already. This campaign began, nobody gave any thought to Georgia being a seriously competitive state. Well, you are a seriously competitive state, not only for the presidency, but for 2 U.S. Senate seats. And you're going to elect Nikema Williams, who's going to become one of the great members of the United States Congress, as well as other great members of Congress. So Georgia, the whole country is looking at you, and we appreciate all that you have done, your great voter turnout efforts, and we wish you the best of luck. We got 4 more days to go. Let's put our shoulders to the wheel. Let's do it. Let's win in Georgia. Let's win throughout the country. Let's transform this country. Thank you all very much.